Good afternoon, everybody. It's Wednesday. It's about 20 minutes after 3 p.m., and the pause continues, and COVID is taking its toll in New York, and I'm very, very sorry to say it's getting personal. Uh, but what I want to talk about today in various about various segments, about 15 minutes apiece. I'm going to give you an overview of um, the three sections of English colonies in North America, or at least in what becomes the United States, the 13 English colonies. Uh, then in a second segment, I'll talk about the enslaved Africans that were brought to America and how they fit into everything. Um, Third segment is going to be talking about the Pilgrims and the Puritans, Plymouth Colony and Massachusetts Bay Colony, and specifically then the fourth segment will be talking about how those colonies expanded into what we now specifically talk about New England, the New England colonies, um, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Connecticut, and also tying in then to the movie The Crucible, we'll be talking about um, the Puritans and this idea of witchcraft and witches and the devil and the theocracy form of government and the witch trials that surround the story of the Crucible, the movie The Crucible. So anyway, this first segment, we want to talk about the three sections of the eastern seaboard or the Atlantic coast of what is now the United States of America, and the 13 colonies. We'll start in the South, and we'll work our way up. First of all, Jamestown, 1607, the first permanent English colony in North America. Roanoke was an attempt at colonizing by the English, and as we said last time, it's still a mystery to this day as to what actually happened to that colony. But it never became permanent because it somehow was wiped out or disappeared. Well, let's talk about the southern colonies that eventually do. Just a second. Thank you. I just had to pause there for a second. The southern colonies. What are we talking about? We're talking about Virginia. We're talking about North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Okay. First of all, take a look at the climate. It is the further south you go towards the equator, the more tropical it's going to become. Now, we're not saying that Virginia is a tropical climate, but it certainly is. There's four seasons, mild winters, and extended warm weather. Again, you do find the climate with long growing seasons, uh, long, hot, and rainy, um, large expanse of flat, fertile land. It became conducive to plantation farming, and as we said, in 1609, the first enslaved Africans come to Virginia, and from there, the plantation farming and a plantation economy began to expand. The crops that they grew were not to sustain them. It was not food. They were not food crops. Okay, they were cash crops. And the first cash crop comes from our friend John Rolfe, and that is the crop, the tobacco, uh, the idea of plantation farming of tobacco. Uh, and tobacco, the further south you go into the Carolinas, uh, rain and dampness and humidity it lends itself to the farming of rice, plantation farming of rice. Um, Indigo, which is a plant that has a blue substance that is made is used to be make dyes for clothing, and later on uh, after tobacco is dethroned as king, we have King Tobacco, but it is replaced later on by the cash crop of cotton. And we'll certainly be talking a lot more about that as we go along. This plantation economy lent itself to a plantation lifestyle, or aristocratic lifestyle. Uh, you had about maybe 20% of Southerners were plantation owners. They owned large tracts of land. So 80% were not, but slavery and plantation farming made up a large portion of the livelihood. Um, they came to Virginia for a different reason than they're going to come to even New England or the middle colonies. Um, and they do find their gold, if you will, in the cash crops that I just mentioned, most prominently with tobacco. Once again. The middle colonies are in the middle, and they are founded a little bit later, but we're talking about New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. A more temperate climate, and four seasons once again, and of course the further north you go, more less of a growing season you have, but you have growing season. You the land is rich in all kinds of natural resources. You also have a geographic feature of abundant harbors. Think about the coast in the middle, the coast, Atlantic coast of the United States today, and in the middle, what do you have? You have New York as a harbor, you have Philadelphia as a harbor, and you have Baltimore. Those three harbors lend itself to the ability for large trading ships to come in close to the land and offload and onload goods back and forth. The land is rich and fertile, but it is not. It does not lend itself to plantation farming. It is limited by the topography, where you have hills and valleys. But you're going to find that in the middle colonies, farming is going to, and farming and dairy and excuse me. The middle colonies, therefore, you're going to find that they are made up of smaller farms, individual farms, the farming of grain, wheat and corn and oats, barley, rye, and the middle colonies then, because of the abundance, and again, like I said, the raising of dairy cattle, and and as well as the ability for cities to grow up on the coast, where there are ports of entry. Um, the middle colonies are then nicknamed the breadbasket or the bread colonies because of all the abundance of grain that they are able to grow. You're not going to find large, like I said, large plantations, and you're not going to find um, slavery. Not that it, not that slavery does not exist in these colonies. They certainly do. It certainly does, but on a smaller scale and not like the South with their plantations. Then moving up to New England, after Jamestown in 1607, you're going to find that the founding of Plymouth Colony in 1620 is the next region, and that is nicknamed New England because it by all appearances, it's just a stone throw away across the Atlantic Ocean from Old England. The climate, the topography, and therefore the culture and the way of life is going to mimic, in many ways, what they left in England. It's a harsher climate. It's a shorter growing season. There are mountains and hills and rocky land that sometimes is not as conducive to large farms. But they turn to what is, excuse me, that's the bell. I gotta go. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Um, we were talking about the New England colonies. The New England colonies of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Um, they are going to be founded by various Protestant breakaway religions, what might nowadays be called fundamentalist Christian religions. I'm going to talk more about them later on in the upcoming segments. But what did they find? They find a climate and a topography that mimics merry old England, and that's not the greatest in terms of living conditions. It's harsh, cold and harsh winters, rocky soil. So they make lemonade out of the lemons that they're dealt, and but what they do find is, first of all, another great harbor, Boston Harbor, that's going to lend itself that way. Tremendous timber, forests, and forests of various types of hardwood trees, and also the what they call naval stores, or the pine trees that give give the give off pitch and tar and turpentine and the various types of things that can be used in shipbuilding. So there's going to be again, there's going to be some farming, there's going to be some herding, but also they're going to use the timber for shipbuilding, and those ships are going to foster a fishing industry and trade. Okay, and they have the harbor of Boston to then to trade from back and forth from England and the Caribbean. Okay, so New England colonies, the middle colonies, the southern colonies, New England, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. Middle colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. The southern colonies, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.